So that's why I got to know like all the diversity of plants, and really mossy plants, because mosses are not just mosses. It's bryophytes, the group of bryophytes. It includes mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. And like, you know, I could talk about this for many hours, but I'm not going to bore anyone here. But just to be technical, mosses is just one group of bryophytes, which is the earliest group of plants after the algae. And there are extremely sensitive plants, but they're ancient. They're like about 500 million years. So after the algae, the mosses, liverworts, mossy plants, I call them here, just to be simple, they're the first land plants. They colonized Earth. They're closer related to the algae. So when you build a tree of life, you can look at the ancestors of plants, which are the green algae, and then the first land plants that branch off from the tree of life are the mossy plants, are liverworts, hornworts, and mosses. Okay, so they're just liverworts. I refuse to call them mosses because I work on them in the cloud forest, and most of the mossy plants in the cloud forest are actually liverworts, not mosses. But people refer to them as mosses because that's what they know. So I'm just going to refer to them as mossy. Mossy plants are mosses, but my sort of deep affection is towards the liverworts, because this is the group of plants that dominate canopies and just the entire landscape in moist habitat. Like the Pacific Northwest in the US, for example, is very mossy, and the cloud forests here. And here's not so much. Now in the rainy season, when you walk around, you can see like green patches of little plants. That's kind of carpets, cushions of them, and these are mosses mostly. So the closest ancestors of land plants, and first being the mossy plants, is green algae from freshwater in the Cariaceae. Okay, Cara is the closest ancestor, is a sister group of lineage of the land plants, and so we have algae growing on land, in freshwater, and also in oceans. In oceans, most commonly known as the seaweeds. Okay, but you also have freshwater algae, and some of the freshwater algae look actually like plants. If you saw a Cara plant, you wouldn't think it's an alga. Okay, it looks just like a plant, because of the reproductive system and the structure, physiology, and the molecular composition. They're classified as algae. They're not plants. They're plants because they're photosynthesized, but they're not land plants. So I distinguish between land plants, I call them plants, and everything that's not land plant, it's purely aquatic, we call algae. I'm focused mostly on the first group, the oldest group of land plants, being the bryophytes, mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. And why they were so interesting is because they're actually sensitive. They're sensitive to environment. Most people are familiar with lichens, which is a symbiotic relationship between an alga, a green alga, and a fungus, or cyanobacteria and a fungus, which are used to test quality of air, for example. Okay, they're indicators for pollution. Now you can use bryophytes, mosses, liverworts, in the same way as indicators for climate. So that was my research area here, coming to Peru, using these sensitive plants to study cloud forests, because cloud forests are very sensitive and unique and very threatened ecosystems. So I used plants as indicators to study, basically to get an idea, to get baseline data for cloud forests, for the health of cloud forests, and understand the extent of out cloud forests and so forth. Cloud forests being one of the most diverse habitats on Earth. They comprise only about 1% of all forests on Earth, and they're extremely species rich. They have animals and plants which only occur in these habitats. And cloud forests are one of the most threatened habitats. So when with global warming, climate change, we're gonna be losing those ecosystems. And there is a lot of research that has been done in Monteverde, in Costa Rica, and they already have seen in the last few decades, 20, 30 years of research, the cloud base have already moved upslope, and there's many parts of the very unique ecosystem are already drying out. So about 20% of species diversity are found in cloud forests. So we have a very disproportionate number of species that rely on this very unique ecosystem in comparison to the very small area. So you probably agree with me, if this area gets reduced because of global change, we're looking at losing a very big number of species. And I'm not talking just plants, because I'm mostly focused on plants, but they are primary producers. So if we lose plants, we also lose animals. So I'd like to look at the bigger picture